This is the National Briefing. I am Kelly Nash, and this story's got everything I would think that the media would love. Corporate greed, passionate protesters, and yet it's pretty silent out here. All right, well, I think it might be because the issue is very complex and they don't imagine that the general public can handle it. However, you are not the general public. As a consumer of the National Briefing, you are a high IQ individual with the ability to take on nuances and come to your own decision. I'll give you my opinion at the end, and you can do with that as you'd like. But first, the facts. Yesterday, the Supreme Court had a trial regarding the parent company Bayer, who now is the parent company of Monsanto. Monsanto has a product that you've probably heard of called Roundup, and inside of Roundup is a drug called glyphosate. Now, there was supposed to be a big rally. It wasn't as big as maybe anticipated, but there was probably 1,000 people who showed up at the thing called People vs. Poison rally. This was an ad used to promote that event.
For decades, Bayer and Monsanto have poisoned our food and our families with glyphosate, the active ingredient in Roundup. And now, facing over 170,000 cancer lawsuits worth $16 billion, Bayer wants the Supreme Court to bail them out.
Now, like most advertising, if it was that simple, everybody would be on one side of the issue. But it's not that simple. So, glyphosate, does it cause cancer? Nobody knows. The closest you've got would be, well, you have the World Health Organization, which is, I'll just say, a shady organization. But the World Health Organization declared, I think in 2015, that glyphosate, and I'm not exaggerating, quote unquote, probably is a carcinogenic. They don't have the link. They just said it probably is a carcinogenic. Okay, well, that's one thing. Then you've also got the studies that show no cause and effect, but it is just unusual, we'll say, that in 71% of the counties in the United States that have a high pesticide use, an increase in non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. But they can't prove that the two are correlated. And if it is correlated, why not the other 29% of the counties? Why are they not getting it? So that question remains. We'll also point out that I think this is important for us to recognize, that in the United States, the Environmental Protection Agency, going back to 2008, said that glyphosate is a miracle. I mean, that's not that long ago, right? That's less than 20 years ago, 18 years ago. They described it as a miracle that would help feed the world because glyphosate kills all these, insects that destroy crops and whatnot. So the crops are not going to be crushed out by weeds or insects, those types of things. So the farmers will have many more oranges, peaches, the things that we love to eat. However, glyphosate, once introduced into the crops, can't wash it off. It's in there forever. When you're eating it, you're eating glyphosate. One of the things that I'll point out as well is that in Europe, we're not going to get into the numbers, but it's about a third less is what their maximum level for glyphosate is. And here in the United States, we do have a higher, although not shocking, it's not like off the charts higher, levels for cancer amongst the people who distribute it, among the people who are putting it on the crops. So is it tied into an increase in whatever? I mean, could it be cancer? Could it be lower testosterone, worsening of estrogen, all of those types of things? They have not been able to prove any of that so far. So you've got two health organizations in the United States. I already mentioned the Environmental Protection Agency, but you've also got the agriculture who've decided years ago that it is safe And then you got a company in Monsanto who, again, 18 years ago was being praised for this stuff, and now they're being sued for this stuff. And you have a very passionate base. Robert Kennedy was one of the leaders talking about this stuff, glyphosate. He'd be talking about how he was seeing the linkage. Although, again, no studies. Now, they do have studies that show if you intentionally overdose a mammal with this stuff, meaning, 10, 20 times the amount that's allowed for a human being or a mammal to have, then they do see an increase in cancer. But at the levels that we're talking about, they're not able to see that as of yet. But science does shift. So maybe someday in the future, they'll be able to prove it. In the interim, what we've got yesterday at the Supreme Court is a hearing because although there is no warning labels on this stuff, Monsanto has done a couple of things. One, they've taken it off the shelves for the general consumer. In other words, if you were to buy Roundup at your local hardware store, it does not have glyphosate in it. At the same time, they have been sued successfully in different states. Now, that's what they're appealing. They're saying, wait a minute. The federal government of this country has said, we don't need a warning. There's nothing to warn about. And we continue to sell our product. And now, at the state level, those judges are ruling against us to the tune of millions of dollars. Now, I don't know if this helps or hurts their case, but the Monsanto had come up with an idea where they were willing to pay out, they put together a $7.2 billion settlement. That was what, back in February? Well, a $7.25 billion settlement that would resolve all lawsuits that said anything to do with Roundup caused non-Hodgkin lymphoma. Again, there's no proof that was actually cause and effect. Just a lot of coincidences, possibly. But again, Monsanto says we'll pay $7.25 billion. You can distribute this amongst everybody who's got a lawsuit against us, but then nobody else can sue us. That I think that actually makes them look more guilty. I'll just be honest with you. So here we are today with the Supreme Court. Now, I'm seeing very little coverage at all about this. The only thing that I'm seeing is there's a mixed reaction from the judges. Obviously, I don't want to say obviously, but the Trump administration is somewhat divided. You've got Robert Kennedy, very outspoken critic of this chemical. At the same time, the Trump administration just leaning on the previous advice of the EPA and others saying we can't say that they're doing anything wrong. So they're writing it. They wrote an amicus brief to the Supreme Court supporting Monsanto, which has ticked off a lot of the MAHA movement. So we do have a division there. We have a lot of liberals who, of course, they're always against corporations. So you have MAGA MAHA members protesting with, the purple hair septum rings. And this is not enough for the news to cover. Again, I believe it's because of the complexities of what we're talking about. My personal opinion on this is just my personal opinion. I have no idea how it's possible to hold Bayer or Monsanto liable for anything in this at this point, because until the federal government comes out with a warning and says this has been linked to cancer, it's like suing the cigarette companies in the 1960s. Until there had been something from the federal government, you might have some early research, you might have some inkling, you might be able to tie it eventually, but it's not been tied yet. Now, would I like to see, this is what I would propose, that Congress immediately take a vote to lower the thresholds. As I mentioned earlier, in Europe, it's about a third is what they're willing to put on their crops. About a third. And I don't know, again, I haven't done enough research on this to see if their crops have been negatively affected to the point where, the U.S. crops are just way outperforming them because they have this extra glyphosate on it. But if But even if it was, it just seems like lowering the level would address a lot of issues. I think it shows that Congress is concerned about the health of the American public. I think it shows that we're learning that there might be something there. So until we can actually prove it, we're trying to take some proactive steps. This is a congressional move, though. I don't think that the Supreme Court has the ability, although they did say that I think it was John Roberts and was it Gorsuch? There was two conservative-leaning judges who their only pushback really seemed to be, from what I saw in the reporting last night, was that if we were to shield you here, what is the remedy if future science proves that this is cause and effect? And again, I would just say, well, then at that point, everything opens up again. I mean, I'm not a Supreme Court justice, but it seems like you're not issuing a permanent ban on lawsuits against Bayer or Monsanto. But you're saying if the science shows this, then you are going to stop using it or dial it back to an acceptable level. And if you don't, then you're open to the lawsuits. But being able to go after them at this point just does not seem feasible, although I know I'm ticking off a lot of MAHA members right now. That's my thoughts. What are your thoughts? Let me know on social media at Kelly Nash Radio.
In a culture drowning in spin and censorship, this is your lifeboat, the National Briefing.